We are breaking down a lot of topics in the industry right now. Thread users had fallen from 49 people 10 days ago to 23 million today. There's always been this fascination with X dating back to his PayPal days. That's where he originally bought the X domain. I think it's top 5 all time for a 1-2 opening in box office history. This is the first time there's been a dual strike, writers and actors. Both unions have been on strike in over 60 years. What's up, everybody? Welcome on inside yet another edition of the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. We are breaking down a lot of topics in the industry right now. I mean, when you wake up, there's this new thing called Threads, and then Elon's rebranding to X, and the actors strike, and the Barbie Oppenheimer news. A lot of stuff to get into. So I wanted to talk about those 4 topics in particular in this mini pod edition. Once again, I want to talk about Threads, the updates there, and what's happening with that platform. Elon rebranding Twitter to X, the actors and writers strike against the Motion Picture Alliance and production studios, what that means for the industry, and also the big movie box office opening extravaganza, record-breaking Barbie and Oppenheimer, and how that all relates to marketing and much, much more. Let's start with Threads. As you know, we've talked a lot about on the podcast and across my social media over the last couple of weeks. We saw that in less than a week, Threads was the fastest app to hit 100 million downloads, 100 million users in history. They later were able to get up to 150 million. What's so impressive about that is there was no real marketing by Threads. This was just kind of released using, again, Instagram as the base. And they were able to acquire millions of downloads. Was reading some articles, and it kind of reminded me, if you guys remember out there as well, you probably forgot about this because I did. But, you know, Meta has tried this before. They created Snapchat clones back in the day, like Poke and Slingshot, and those never got off the ground. So it's you got to give them shout outs, and it's impressive that they hit the market at the right time. So many people frustrated with Twitter, they were able to capitalize. Now, an analytics firm came out recently this week, and we record this on July 25th, saying that Thread users had fallen from 49 people 10 days ago to 23 million today, and the time spent on app has declined from an average of 21 minutes per day to 6 minutes during the same period. So there's a couple different ways this can go, right? One way would be Google+. If you remember, Google+ rose to 90 million users. Everybody thought it was going to be the next big thing. A lot of brands started to play around with it and, spend time, resources, and budget. And then it was pretty much not relevant. The other thing you can say is, hey, we're already at 150 million users. We've done no marketing. We've done very little product upgrades, and we can continue to build off this base, which obviously Meta will make that argument. And with that, I think as of today, thanks and help to our new producer, Kayla, and KDO that are on the show as well. But Zuckerberg did announce that the new features are coming. And the 2 that came out most recently are the chronological feed that people were really excited about. So they've released that chronological feed. They've launched a following tab, so kind of a who you follow versus a For You page. Before, if you remember on Threads, it was just kind of a hodgepodge of whatever was on the Threads account at that point. But a following tab now, which was a very highly requested new feature. And I'm sure, as we get going, there'll be a desktop app, and a lot of things can happen as they can continue to build on this. So really, I think in my personal opinion, here's what I think is going to happen. 2, it's going to be about 2 things on Meta's side, and then an ancillary thing on the marketplace side. 2 things Threads and Meta can do: continue to listen to their users and have feature and upgrades consistently to make sure people don't get fed up with the new app and any limitations it may have. And then double down on marketing. You gotta create some FOMO content. You gotta create some celebrities, pay some creators, create content that you could only find on Threads, and that's gonna give you the best chance of success. And of course, the third ancillary part of this whole thing is Twitter. As Twitter continues to potentially be more erratic, more people are turned off by it, there's got to be a thread-based, a text-based platform that people use. And every time Twitter fails, every time Twitter pisses somebody off, Threads will be able to draft off that. So that's the big things that I'm kind of eyeing as, again, the demand for a text-based app, and particularly a new text-based app that can rival that of Twitter. there's a lot of growth levers that Meta can pull when it comes to, again, the marketing of this, celebrities on platform, paying creators, making sure that they're really staying in tune to user feedback and making sure they're moving quickly on that. If they do that, they can continue to be a player in the space and not turn into Google Plus, which I know would be Zuckerberg's biggest fear. Speaking of that, that dovetails very nicely into what the hell's going on with Twitter. So I mentioned this on social media with a quick, 20-second video across my David J. Brickley feeds. But what the hell is Elon doing? We know that he has rebranded Twitter to X, although there's still a button that says tweet. A lot of, confusing things out there. But just to give you some more context on what Elon is doing, if you follow him throughout his career, first of all, he is obsessed with the letter X, okay? So if you look at SpaceX, if you look at Tesla Model X, he named his son X. There's always been this fascination with X dating back to his PayPal days. That's where he originally bought the X domain. He's always had this goal of really what he calls creating an everything app. Now, those of you that are familiar with what's happening over in China with an app called WeChat, they have over 1 billion users. They're able to send text messages, make payments. They book flights through WeChat. They play games. They call Ubers or call cabs through that same app. So that's essentially what Elon Musk is trying to create by buying Twitter. He didn't buy Twitter for $46 billion to just make Twitter really dope and make Twitter really cool. He used it as a foundational piece to build this everything app. Now, my first inclination when I saw the rebrand is, shouldn't you wait until you build a few of these other verticals before you rebrand the entire umbrella? We understand that what Elon is trying to create is pretty much an app. Think of it like this. Think of it like Twitter, Venmo, Uber, Amazon e-commerce, all wrapped into one. I applaud the effort. I think that'd be really awesome if he pulled that off. However, you usually don't rebrand to this extent until you have a couple of those verticals built out. Now, if Elon went and bought Venmo or Elon was able to partner with PayPal or something like that, then they decided to rebrand the mothership company. Like, Zuckerberg has Meta, which oversees Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram. I get having an umbrella company, but it's just way too early. It causes a lot of confusion. People are wondering why he changed Twitter to X and all these different things. So, to dig deeper, though, into WeChat and the success it has over in China, they actually surveyed folks over in China, and they said that if WeChat was not available on their device, 95% of iPhone users said they would ditch their iPhone and their Apple device if WeChat was not available in the App Store. So that shows you how much that is penetrated in that market. And Elon says he wants to transform Twitter into a PayPal competitor, making it the biggest financial institution in the world. Now, really, it's all about market fit. Data shows that more than 80% of all Chinese adults use mobile payments. In comparison, only 33% of us US adults use mobile payments. So we have things like Apple Pay. We obviously have things like Venmo, but we still are pulling out that debit card. We're still using cash. So there needs to be really a society shift here, but that's essentially what Elon wants to do. Again, it's another erratic change. It's another change that didn't have a lot of thought put into it, in my personal opinion. And it just causes a lot of conflict. A lot of brands that pay money on their advertising network just look at this as kind of a chaotic place. Nobody is really given a heads up. These things are going to happen. Keep in mind, Twitter, talk about from a branding perspective. The Twitter bird is possibly 100,000 different places across websites, linear, billboards. The Twitter logo is everywhere because it's such a prominent social app. And now pretty much overnight, he has pretty much dumped all that social value in that app or in that logo. So if you're wondering what's going on, like a lot of us did when we woke up and all of a sudden there was a video on Elon's timeline about X, and the new CEO that came over from NBC Universal was really excited about the launch as well. Now there's, of course, some trolls that saying Microsoft owns the X trademark. Meta also owns the X trademark. Elon says they own different verticals of the trademark, but not what he's trying to do. So we'll see how all that goes. But again, I applaud the effort of trying to create an everything app over the next 5 to 10 years. I don't applaud rebranding so quickly because at the end of the day, all you have is Twitter right now. And until I see more verticals being built out, and also, because Twitter has been so chaotic, because it's been so erratic in these changes, it's going to be tough if you purchase or you create some of this app infrastructure to create a payment method? Is it going to be as clunky? Is it going to be not as well thought out as we've seen a lot of these other features created? So it's been a bumpy ride so far for Twitter. That's why, it's interesting we start off with Threads conversation to start this podcast off, because that bumpy ride has led to some positive momentum for Meta and Mark Zuckerberg. So again, as they continue to stumble out of the gates, I think that Meta and Threads can capitalize on that. But either way, both platforms are still very much in the lexicon and in social media as a whole. All right, so let's move on to what happened over the weekend as we record this again on July 25th. And that was the success. And, people talk about the box office not being the game anymore and, going straight to streamers and kind of that pay-per-view model. But, what Barbie and Oppenheimer did collectively, usually if you look at the history of box office openings, it's always one. One can have the $100 million, the Avatars, the going back to the Titanics and things like that. You could have one movie that weekend that can command the $100 million opening. And then the second is like maybe 10 million, maybe 20 million at the most. The fact that Barbie broke records at the box office opening weekend, 155 million domestically, 182 million globally. And then the second, Oppenheimer, got 80.5 million domestically, 174 million globally. Was looking up some stats that I think it's top 5 all time for a 1-2 opening in box office history. So incredible here. And, actually I got to shout out to KDO and Danny Pham here at STN Digital, who did an amazing presentation in our team Monday morning meeting about the success of these launches and how different the marketing campaigns obviously were for both. You saw Barbie everywhere the last couple of months, and they did an incredible job with the AI selfie generator, which I'm sure a lot of you saw. We saw the Barbie Dream House on Airbnb. We saw partnerships with different game consoles and the Google takeover. If you Googled Barbie showtimes, or you even Googled the actors, right? You Margot Robbie or Ryan Gosling. Google turned pink, and there was pink sparkles, and I mean they spent over $100 million in a marketing budget. And really, what I said, and what really brought Katie, when you guys were talking about this, and would love to bring you in on this conversation. What really got me going was it's really helpful when you own a color, right? I think Netflix may potentially own the color red alongside Coca-Cola. I think Barbie owns pink. I don't know if you agree, but when you're able to just like get the pink color everywhere for the first couple months of this launch campaign, I mean, I saw it everywhere. I'm sure in your circles you saw it everywhere, and that really led to the hype and the heads up, like, yo, this movie's coming.
Yeah, this was my most anticipated movie of the year for sure. To all those listening, hi Barbie, it's Barbie. Mm-hmm. This was not just about, establishing a great summer blockbuster. This was about reinvigorating an entire brand and something bigger than that, which is an idea that this can live forever. And it was so incredibly successful. They put so much thought behind every single piece of marketing, every single piece of licensing, and I can genuinely talk about Barbie all day.
Yeah, and I think too with the casting, right? I mean, you can argue that from a female acting standpoint, Margot Robbie is one of the most famous, like, sought-after actresses in the game. Ryan Gosling, from a male standpoint as well, is very well liked, very well touted. So to have those two in the lead, and then this is where I think from a marketing perspective, so many brands don't think enough about their owned and operated. Mattel, who's that umbrella company, they had pink merchandise across all their different Mattel toys, for a period of time as well. And they were able to kind of roll that out across all their different owned and operated brands. And that's where I think, brands that have these umbrella accounts, I don't think often think about this. I think if I can go back, Disney Plus did a really good job with the launch of Disney Plus, leaning into Marvel and ESPN and Nat Geo and ABC and all the brands that Disney owns. They were able to really have a kind of a cool, Twitter thread back and forth, community management stunt. The same goes, I know HBO has done things similar, But even the fact that they took care of, obviously, who in pop culture will be good as the acting leads, check. How can we lean on the nostalgia? Everybody can probably remember playing with Barbies and has that childhood hook to it, check. We can use all the Mattel toys underneath our umbrella and do some pink, releases, check. The AI selfie generator to get more virality and probably pay some influencers to get that going, check. The dream house in Malibu, a life-size dream house, it's such a perfect. Anyways, I thought it was brilliant. Obviously, they spent a ton of money on it. And this is why they were so successful. I mean, the budget for the film was a lot. It was $145 million, but in one weekend, they were able to recoup all that money spent, and they'll continue. I think Monday they made $25 million, which is insane for a weekday, the Monday after the opening weekend. So they're going to do very, very well, Katie.
Yeah, can I mention two other points? One of my favorite pieces of marketing campaign that the Barbie movie did was their collaboration with Xbox. Not only can you win a custom Barbie Xbox and its own dream house console, which is incredible, they collaborated with Mattel to create a line of Barbie gamers that had their own line of Xbox clothing.
Love that.
So this is not only just getting Barbie lovers to engage with more Xbox content, vice versa. It's getting Xbox directly into the hands of Barbie consumers. So incredible.
And I think I'm pretty positive that this is a limited box office release where you can't currently get this on streaming. So the reason I bring that up is because there's still marketing left to be done. Kayla brought up a good point before the show, Katie, that Nike recently has announced a Barbie-inspired low dunk sneaker that will be dropping this fall. So especially since they've been so successful and they've already recouped their money in terms of their budget for this film, they're able to now do even more things. And man, this is going to do so much. Yes, the movie can be successful and the profit for said movie can be successful, but inserting Barbie back into the culture, lexicon, nostalgic piece where someone like yourself too can get more excited about different things that I guess would be partnerships or different pink releases. Like I mentioned, the color's big, I think, in this whole thing because it immediately is identifiable. I think in the next 2 years, if you and I ever see the color pink, we're going to think it's probably a Barbie type stunt and or marketing campaign.
Yeah. And, something I thought was really successful throughout the movie that the marketing campaigns leaned into is Mattel let themselves be a part of the joke. And I think so many brands are really careful to not make fun of themselves because it could work against them. And Mattel really leaned into being a part of the conversation and letting people have a seat at the table. And it really worked to their favor to the point where Mattel reportedly has 14 new movies in active development.
So this is the new Marvel potentially, right?
Definitely is. I mean, nothing's going to beat Barbie in my eyes. But...
Now, on the kind of opposite side of it, I think, Oppenheimer, they had some really cool marketing campaigns, part of it, but nowhere near the budget, nowhere near, I guess the pure amount and the partnerships and the owned and operated, which is pretty, like Danny mentioned in our Monday meeting with Christopher Nolan. That's how kind of he rolls his movies out in that way. He has obviously a very rabid fan base that follows him around to his different movies that he directs, but a very different piece, a period piece. And yet again, with all that hype around Barbie, and maybe that's also, they were able to draft off each other a little bit. Maybe if, the families wanted to kind of split up and go to different movies on that weekend, I wonder how much that helped in terms of just getting more people at the theaters, as theaters continue to try to make sure that's a possibility on every weekend. So I just thought it was very interesting to have back-to-back movies. Both were very successful. Any movie that does $80 million domestically, $175 globally, is considered one of the largest movies of the year. And the fact they both open on the same weekend. Again, I think we get too quick that linear TV is dead. Going to the movies is dead. I think we are way too quick. Netflix is now dead. I mean, we're so quick to just write off these massive mediums and these massive businesses because a new technology comes out. Oh, AI is coming. We don't need employees anymore. Like, can we slow down for a second? It's never as quick as we think. And I think still giving so much respect to what can be done in some of these, I guess, older mediums, I think is important, because if it's done right and you spend the right money, time, effort, planning, you can break historic records, which is pretty cool. All right. And then again, this is all kind of leading into each other. Threads and the Twitter. the success of this box office opening into the writers and actors strike. And I know that a lot of us, work in entertainment, and this is, something where I think, obviously Barbie and Oppenheimer are already in the can, as they say, and it didn't affect their release, but it did affect the premiere. I know actors walked out of their premieres to be in unison with the actors and the writers during their strike. So I'll give you a quick, because I was even curious myself to do some research on exactly what's going on with the writers and the actors who are really on the same picket line against the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which represents the studios, the streamers, and the production companies. So this is the first time there's been a dual strike, writers and actors. Both unions have been on strike in over 60 years. So this is very unprecedented. They had more than a month of talks on a 3-year deal they were trying to renew with SAG-AFTRA, which is part of the actors. And, union leaders said that the streaming model that has taken over the industry with the Hulus and the Netflix and Disney Pluses is not fair. They're saying that they're cheated out of the share of the income. Now, those of you that have, studied TV and more about how it used to be done, or it really honestly still is when it comes to linear, is back in the day, if you remember, an actor who appeared like on a Seinfeld or The Office, every time that show had a rerun or was picked up by a TBS to rerun an episode of Friends, those actors got what they called royalty checks when the show appeared in rerun. So basically every time that show was resold, they were able to reap the benefits and everybody, quote unquote, won together. Now the streaming model's been different where, they pay up front and they pay the actors obviously to be in a Stranger Things, but every stream, let's say, I guess a good example would be a Stranger Things, anything that's been kind of created on streaming specifically, let's say House of Cards, right? Those actors were paid on the upfront for that limited run, whether it was 4 or 5 seasons, and that's pretty much it. They don't get paid each time it gets streamed, much like Spotify does, right? Every time an artist gets a stream, although they argue it's not enough money, at least every time you stream a song from Jack Harlow, that he gets, a percentage of that revenue. So actors are saying the inflation is outpacing the scheduled pay bumps in their contracts. And again, another huge thing is artificial intelligence, where writers and actors are concerned that they're going to use their likeness or be able to really automate a lot of what they do. So it's kind of a mess. And I think as we record this on July 25th, there hasn't been a lot of updates. It seems like they haven't gotten back to the table. Now, if you want to look at some precedents here, the longest previous writer's strike in 1988 lasted 5 months. The most recent strike back in 07-08 went on for about 3 months. So, it's interesting because obviously they need each other. And every time that this days go by, production shoots get pushed further and further. The studios and the streamers will not have any new shows to bring out to their upfronts and make money on in the fall. So it definitely hurts both sides. But I thought, and listen, a lot of actors can't say anything right now because and writers, they're not allowed to go on social media to talk about this thing because of their union contract. So there's not a lot of prominent figures that are able to speak up in a large way. But I saw this tweet, if we can pull it up, by Andrew Schultz. He actually posted on Instagram as well. He's a comedian. And again, this is like one of the few celebrities that could probably speak this freely on it because he's not a part of the union. But I thought this was really interesting. He shared that the real issue, in his opinion, is that actors and writers want fair residual payments from the streamers. Again, much like I just mentioned, they used to get residual payments in syndication anytime a show was reran. They want that same type of deal every time a show is streamed or resold. But what he says here is like, the problem is, his suspicion is that streamers are refusing to share the viewership with the actors, not because they're being cheap and they don't want to win together, but because no one is watching, and revealing extremely low viewership would kill the stock price. That's what we've known about the streamers for so long, right? Is they've been they've held viewership close to the vest. We have Nielsen ratings when it comes to linear television. We have the same when it comes to radio, when you want to see how many people are listening to a radio show. And guess what? Radio hosts get actually bonus every quarter based on if they're number one in the ratings in their time slot in their city or in their region. But that's exactly what is not happening on the streaming side. So basically, he goes on to show is that if most of these streamers are losing money and they're kind of acting like they're more successful than they actually are, if they come out and they publicly say, okay, this show has got 100,000 streams, but the market thought it was getting millions and millions and millions of streams, that would essentially tank their stock price. If their stock price tanks and the real viewership numbers are shown that they're not as proud of, there would be way less budget to create more shows and green light, which means way less acting gigs and writing gigs for these folks, these 26,000 people that are part of the union. So, everybody says at some point they're going to have to share these numbers and it really is going to have to be a win-win. But I think that lies the problem, right? Studios are losing a lot of money right now, not being able to produce shows and not being able to get ready for their fall campaigns and things like that. But what could be even more detrimental is if they're kind of hiding behind some of their numbers or kind of playing the game a little bit. And if they ever had to publicly announce it like Nielsen does for linear ratings, there could be a lot of streamers that are saying they're doing really, really well, and they're talking about net subscribers added and maybe even talking about how they've increased their profit year over year. But if those numbers are not in line with what they've told investors in the past, it really could tank their stock price. So I thought that was an interesting take. Not to say that's exactly what is going on right now. I just thought it was an interesting take, and it makes a lot of sense. As again, if you're a studio head, you would think you would want to play the same model that was played in linear, that's played on streamer platforms like Spotify when it comes to giving people money when when a show or when a song is more successful. But there could be a larger economic impact at play here if all these numbers become public. I would assume at some point the streamers will have to abide by some type of Nielsen type of rating, and maybe a third party will have to confirm those numbers and that data in order to kind of audit or kind of act as the in-between the actors and the studios and the streamers. But there may lies a problem. So we may be in for a little bit of time as the studios figure out from a business perspective, if they actually come to an agreement with the actors, what's going to be their fallback plan if their numbers aren't as impressive as their original investors or stockholders thought they were. Whew. So much has happened, KDO, in just like a week, I feel like. So I'm glad we came to the people.
Yeah, definitely a week that we needed to be reporting on.
Yeah. I was like, how do we need to lay down a mini pod here? Because there's a lot of stuff going on. And listen, right when I talked actually at our Comic-Con event. We had a Comic-Con event down here in San Diego, invited a lot of colleagues and clients. And I had a talk with one of our clients, Katie, and I said, this job that we're in, this career is very cool because no day is the same and it constantly challenges you. But the second you feel like you got the recipe to that algorithm, Elon Musk decides to rebrand to X, or Meta decides to release Threads, and never a dull moment in social and marketing.
Someone's got to keep us on our toes.
I love it. So I hope that was helpful. I think those are the 4 main stories that you need to be paying attention to right now as marketers in this space right now. If you haven't already, go and look at what Barbie and Oppenheimer did, honestly, for their marketing. I think you can learn a lot. And again, pay attention to how they were able to leverage not only their owned and operated, but from a distribution standpoint, how they had key partnerships, like Katie mentioned, with the Xboxes of the world. And now they're going to continue that marketing window with Nike and dropping shoes. And Airbnb. It was just brilliant how they did it. Now, you could argue, David, I don't have $100 million for my budget. I get that. But the overall philosophy of how they rolled that out was really, again, as a marketer, something that was very inspiring to look at and see out in the space. And especially in this economic climate, there's a lot of talk about the money's not there and layoffs. Well, in this situation, it was nice to see such a hefty budget go towards something that was so successful at the box office. There you have it, the 4 big stories that you need to know on a mini edition. Hope you guys enjoyed it and got value out of it. I hope I did the homework so you didn't have to. How about that? Always happy to bring you all value. Thank you so much to Kayla, one of our newest producers on the podcast, for all her help on the research. KDO, of course, for her insight and technically producing the entire show. And of course, you for listening. So make sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes and follow along the Business Social on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much. This has been yet another edition of the Business of Social podcast. My name is David Brickley. It's all been powered by STN Digital.